Many people say that they want to write a book, yet 9 out of every 10 people who start writing a book never finish it, leaving one of their biggest dreams unfulfilled. So, what is it about the 1 in 10 people who do finish writing their book? What do they have, and what drives them to complete their books, their plays, and their songs? Welcome to the Editor's Desk, where we explore their writing experiences, their motivations, and their struggles. And now, here are your hosts, author, writing coach, and self-publishing guide, Lynn Everard, and author, Louise Gomez.
Hi, everybody. Happy Thursday. Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of The Editor's Desk. How are you, Lynn?
I'm good. I just had this recollection. You and I released our book 1 year ago today.
Wow, that's right. June 22nd.
June 22nd.
Wow, time flies. It really does. Interesting, right?
Yeah, so
right after the solstice.
Yep. And we had no idea what that next year was going to bring, but here we are, and we've done the show for almost 11 months now, and for the people that don't know, I thought it might be a good time to share that our final show will be next Thursday, and we've done it on Facebook, but be a good opportunity for us to just thank everyone who's followed us and who's watched the show, and especially Dawn and Freddie and all the producers at Ant Media Productions. It's been a real joy and lots of fun, and I wanted to get that in because I think once we start talking to Debbie, time is just going to disappear. So
very true. Yeah, thank you for sharing that with everyone. It's just was a beautiful chapter, right? In our journey of evolution, of growing. I mean, being on the show and being able to speak and share in other people's success and their book writing has definitely been so special to me, and a growth spurt for sure. Definitely.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, so I think it's time to introduce our guest and dive into this topic.
Yeah, thanks for introducing me to Miss Debby Montgomery Johnson, who has written The Woman Behind the Smile, Triumph Over the Ultimate Online Dating Betrayal. Thank you so much for joining us on the show, Debbie.
Thank you for having me. It's a real honor.
I have to say, Debbie, I not only appreciate you for coming, but I really sincerely from the bottom of my heart appreciate you writing about this story, because you really got vulnerable and you really shared some things that maybe for many women are challenging and difficult. And so you were able to do that. And I believe it's just going to ultimately help others. Men and women. Actually.
Exactly. That's why I wrote the book. It was not a story for me or about me. It was really a way to share what happened, because I know there are a lot of men and women out there that this has happened to, and they were feeling alone. And I just thought, once I got past my story and realized that it could help others, that became the impetus of writing the story.
Yeah, and not only the impetus of writing the story, but I think since writing this book, Lynn, I have like 5 or 6 books here that she's written. So talk about making lemonade out of lemons, right? Isn't that remarkable that someone can take that story, write a book, and then boom, write all these others, right?
Well, I think that's what's so amazing is that we are always writing our own story, and we never know which storyline is going to be the one that actually creates something really powerful in the world.
Yeah. So now, Debbie, I know we were chatting a little bit before. You were sharing with me that you've been on like Dr. Oz, Mel Robbins, like all these shows, and it's because your story is so, it's so, you know, I don't want to say shocking. I want to say it's like, it's so amazing that you have the courage to come and speak the truth. That's, I think, what's so riveting about your story.
Well, and that was the important part of the story in telling it, is that most people aren't going to talk, and actually 3 out of 100 victims will speak up. And so in this particular case, in a relationship scam, which it was online dating for me, but it happens on Facebook, it happens on Words with Friends, it happens in every social media thing that we're involved in. There are scammers out there, and I want to call them criminals. They are not,
Yes.
scammers trivializes it.
Yeah.
They are really organized criminals, and they are hurting a lot of people. And so because I didn't know about it, this happened to me back in 2012. I'd lost my husband suddenly, and 6 months after he passed, I was working 2 jobs, his company and another job. My friends said, "Deb, you need a life." They said, you gotta find a life, or get a life. And that to them meant get out there. Now, I was 52 years old. I hadn't dated since I was 20 something when Lou and I got married. And so it was very scary to do something like that. You know, to put yourself out there, and the feelings of, oh, I'm not pretty enough, smart enough, all those enoughs that you go through when you're 16,
Sure.
it all came flooding back. And I was like, okay, just try it. And I did, and you can read the story because it was 2 years of being very vulnerable and opening myself up to someone that I thought I had fallen in love with. And he was an international businessman, was traveling overseas, and actually that was very safe for me because I'd been married for so long. I wasn't ready for someone in my life personally, but I needed a confidant and a friend and a business partner and all those things. And I didn't just arbitrarily start helping some guy out that was overseas.
Right.
But
So he built a
it was a
relationship.
story. It was a 2-year relationship, and it was the ups and downs. It was fun. It was sad. There was so much to it, but he got me through the 2 years after Lou died until he didn't. And then in my story, which is unusual for relationship scams, is that he confessed. He confessed to me that it had been a scam. And at that point, I'm thinking, well, now you're lying. So you got to prove to me, because I'd never met him in person. I hadn't seen him.
So it was just like a long distance
Distance relationship. It wasn't even the phone. Back then it was all through Yahoo Chat. And I have 5, talk about with my first book was actually 4,000 pages of journal that I had printed as what I thought would be family history for my kids. Now it's just evidence that couldn't be used by anybody. So anyway, it all came crashing down, and I was so vulnerable, and so I just felt so stupid. Like, how could I had really good experiences. I'd been an Air Force officer, I'd been a banker, I'd been a paralegal, I'd had all these reasons why I shouldn't have been scammed. But when I started looking at it, I was like, you know what, if I can be taken, then anybody can be taken. And that's really what came out in the story, is that anybody can be taken. And the way to get on to Dr. Oz, and he was great, by the way, Mel Robbins was great. Tamron Hall was good. I was being used for ratings at that point in time. And it was the shock. The media uses it as a shock factor. And once I realized that, and so I went into it fully aware that they were going to try to use my story to shock people, like, oh my gosh, how could that woman do that? Because I gave away a lot of money. But the point for me was that everybody needs to hear about this story.
Right.
Because it's happening to our mothers, our fathers, our grandmothers, our daughters. And people aren't talking about it, and that's the problem, because the scammers are on their way, laughing their way to the bank.
Wow.
And it needs to stop.
Yeah.
And it won't stop unless people start talking about it. And I became part of an organization called SCARS, which is the Society of Citizens Against Relationship Scams. It's an international nonprofit based in Miami. And I was referred to them after a Palm Beach Post article came out back in 2016. And I became the face of the victim. You know, because the head of the organization is Dr. Tim McGinnis, and Tim did not look like the women that we work with. And so at that point, I became the media rep for SCARS because I was willing to open my mouth. And when I realized that it was making a difference for other women and men, but particularly women, I said, you know what, this story is not about me anymore. It's about who I can help, who I can be the hand holder for. And that gave me great strength from the inside out. It was amazing. And it took off on its own. as you can imagine.
Oh, I can see. Yeah.
And it's been used by the media and I've had a lot of media opportunities, and they try to do the gotcha. How could you? And that's when I just say, look, it could happen to you, your son, your wife, anybody. And it's not just single women. I mean, at this point, it was women over 60 that were divorced or widowed that they're targeting. But today, they're targeting everybody that's online.
Oh, yeah.
And anybody that is not paying attention to a link on an email or a chat or a text or whatever can be taken, because it's a business. It's trillions of dollars that go across the pond to China, to Nigeria, to India, wherever. And they're doing it very well. They're actually trained in universities in Nigeria to take us. They are the consummate sales guys. And it's not one person. I hear this from women all the time.
It's a group.
I hear women say, well, my scammer. It's not he, it's they.
Yeah.
And they work in groups, and they're very skilled at what they do.
Interesting. I've had a couple of interesting DMs in my Facebook and my Instagram. How about you, Lynn? Have you had some I know you mentioned to me once you've had a couple of interesting ones, right?
Yeah, well, it's
So
mine are coming in LinkedIn,
Oh, LinkedIn.
and a lot of it is I check out people's profiles very carefully,
Right.
and I look to connect the dots, and to see if they're who they say they are. But I've been actually getting a lot of Chinese women,
Not
looking to
surprised.
strike up some kind of a conversation, but then when I go check out their profile, none of it checks out. So I ignore the request, because there's no point in getting involved in that.
And the
Yeah.
point to that, Lynn, is that we don't need 5,000 followers or friends. We're only going to be talking to 15 or 20 of them anyway. And so those unsolicited friend requests are usually scammers. And be really careful, especially if you're in organizations like we're in women's organizations.
Sure.
And once they become a friend of somebody, now they're a mutual friend, and it lets our guard down. We're thinking,
Yes.
oh, well, if so-and-so trusts them, then maybe we should be their friend.
Yeah.
Don't do that, because the scammers could be coming in as women. And they
Right.
are either women, or they're just a face of a woman with a
Right.
man behind it.
Right.
And so you just have to be really aware. And like Lynn, to be looking, and you do the extra research. Most people are not thinking about that. They're like, oh, well, look, I have a new friend, especially during the pandemic. It exploded.
They must have, yes.
Exploded.
They must have been a big surgeon
So,
during the pandemic.
absolutely.
Because everybody was just home.
Looking
and
for friends.
Yeah.
We're looking
right.
for companionship.
Now, I did have something on Facebook, and actually, Louise, you made me aware of this, that there was a man who sent me a friend request. I wasn't
Yeah.
quite sure who he was, but he looked okay.
Right.
But what I didn't realize is that all he wanted to do was get into my contact list
Yeah.
and then start soliciting. So now it's like
Yeah.
people have to check out
Yeah.
in order for them to be friends. I have to know at least one or two or three or five other people that they know, because, like you said, Debbie, you can only manage so many friendships anyway.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It was interesting because somebody was similar. He was saying, DMing me, and he works in this oil rig or whatever. I was like, delete, block. I don't want to hear it. I don't know. Because of people like you who made us aware.
And that's
So
the point.
thank you.
That's the point.
Because
And
that's how I became aware, because it has
Exactly.
happened to so many people. And then I heard
Exactly.
that story. I said, oh, that's a red flag.
And another red flag is military. And I'm former Air Force. My kids are active duty, and my husband was active duty. I have a lot of military in the family. Most people that haven't had any military in the family, you're very trusting of the uniform, and you're
Sure.
trusting of the person. You're trusting that they're the real thing.
Right.
Well, if they're online like that requesting friends, they are not real military members, because they're not really allowed to do that.
Right.
And it's typically a scammer that's saying, okay, and you're talking about someone in China. Malaysian women love American soldiers
Yeah.
because it's going to get them out of the country,
course.
you know?
Right.
And
There's
so
a
be really,
ticket
really
to
careful.
freedom.
Be careful because, you know, it's a huge problem over in Malaysia too. It's a huge problem in China. And it's interesting, just on a side note, that China has arrested more scammers than most countries have because they're arresting scammers that are scamming Chinese folks.
Oh.
May not care about the ones scamming Americans, but they care about who's scamming the Chinese. The Americans are getting better, but it's typically been difficult because the scammer or the criminals could be out of the country.
Right.
And they are using people in the United States now, and we call them money mules or package mules. It's an additional person. It could be a woman that had been taken as a victim, and then they want to keep in touch with the person. And so they say, I don't have any more money, but the guy will say, well, can you accept a package for me? Can you accept a check for me? And then pass it on to someone else. So because of that being such a hot topic right now, those mules, those intermediaries are the ones being arrested. And I don't care if you're a victim of a relationship fraud. If you have now participated in bringing somebody else in and victimized somebody else, you are going to be prosecuted and possibly put in jail. So it puts a layer of insulation between the original criminals and the victims. And just got to be careful. So the big point here is don't talk to strangers, because that's the only, you know, when someone says that I was stupid for doing what I did, the only thing that I did or other victims have done, they've got a big heart and they've said hello.
I know.
They've said hello to a stranger. So that stranger danger that we talk about to our little guys,
Yeah.
by the time they're in high school or whatever, they're not strangers anymore. We're saying, hey, you know, put your hand out and shake and say hello to Dr. Whoever.
Sure.
So we're conditioned to want to have friends, but we need to really, especially online, be careful with who those people are, because a picture on a screen, I don't know who Lynn is. I've never met him in person.
Right.
I'm taking it on trust that is actually Lynn. But when you're looking at a picture, you don't know where those pictures came from.
Right.
You can go in and you can right click and download someone's picture off a profile, create a family, which is what they happened in my particular case. You know, they will create a family, which those of us that are really family oriented will now gravitate toward.
Right.
So the profiles that they create are extraordinarily effective. So be careful and lock down your own privacy. You don't need to have a public, social media platform unless you're some huge influencer. But even the influencers, you know, the pictures that the men get scammed by are typically porn stars or some actress.
Wow.
And you'd think that would be pretty easy to detect.
Right.
But if you haven't seen the person within a week or two, I would say that they're probably a scammer. And they are so good at that point because they've pulled you in. It's called grooming. And they've pulled you in, and you're in the story now. And when I got so far in, even though I think my gut might have been saying there's a problem here, at that point I'm thinking, we call it chasing the money. It's like, one more time. Let's just get this job over, and then you can come home to me.
Yeah. And you know, they prey on people's vulnerabilities. I mean, you just lost your spouse. This was a whole new world for you. You'd never done this before.
No.
So this was a whole new, and that's what they prey on. So.
I hadn't. But today, the biggest scam going on now is we call pig butchering.
What is that?
It's actually an investment scam. And it's where it's a relationship kind of a thing. But say somebody befriends you and says, hey, you know what? I'm really good at cryptocurrency. I want to show you how to invest. And so it's an abbreviated scam where they'll get you to invest in crypto, and they actually will have you do it, and you'll make a little bit of money.
Right.
And they'll have these sites that look exactly like a investment, legitimate site.
Yeah.
And this is happening a lot to the millennials, a younger group who've grown up online thinking that they're impervious to being scammed and that they know better. Well, they invest. They've made a lot of money, and all of a sudden, poof, the thing's gone, and now they're out their money.
Yeah.
And it's usually crypto. It's not wires or anything that happened when I was scammed. But it's instant money is gone. There are ways to what we say claw it back to get that money back, but very difficult because most victims at that point are angry.
Yeah.
They don't want to work with the police and law enforcement. They're told that nothing can happen, and so they give up and they just become angry citizens. So it's a really tough world out there. You've got to be careful.
It's so amazing, man. The money, the time and energy and effort that these people devote to scamming people. It's like you said, it's their
lifetime.
profession.
It is a
It's
profession.
for them, it's a profession. It's like, wow, if they could have just invested that time and to something else, but whatever.
They'd be phenomenal if they could
Right?
do for good what they do for bad.
Exactly.
Phenomenal.
Because they're very diligent and very.
Makes a lot of money.
Yeah, exactly. Wow. So, Debbie, tell us quickly, we have some time left. Tell us a little bit about a couple of other books that you've written. A Gift Called Fearless, Journey to the Stage. I mean, what else would you like to talk about? Because this book was the impetus to writing all the others. So,
Correct.
what would you like to share with us?
What I want folks to know is I remember when I was a kid that a lot of people would say, you can't write very well. Or, I went away to private school and I had a lot of competition with friends who were excellent writers. And so I really didn't do it. I loved journaling and I
Okay.
would do it for years and then stop.
Nice. Yeah.
And then it would take me years to come back. But I enjoyed the feeling of getting things out. After The Woman Behind the Smile, I did a lot of interviews, and some of the books are actually interviews. They're recordings that have been taken. Not this one, but
Okay.
it's one I didn't bring with me.
Sure.
And that was really fun because I found that being able to talk was so much easier than writing. Except in the scam, I found that writing was really a great way to get all my emotions of Lou dying out, because my husband left the house on Wednesday night, and Thursday morning had an sudden heart attack and died. So when he left on a Wednesday, I never saw him again after that, and I had a lot of grief just inside of me. And so by writing, I was able to get so much more out
Makes
of the
sense.
emotions and the grief and whatever. And so I really enjoyed that. And now I write monthly for a magazine. It's actually called Positive Tribe, and that's where this book came in. We're given a
Nice.
topic or something. I write a lot about my mom and dad. My father is going to be 94. My mom's 88. My dad works for me, and so I
Love it.
spend a lot of time with them. They're local, and I see a lot of things that my parents have been through, and it sparks a memory, or it sparks like an interest on what was life like when you were a kid, and I would write an article about it. Or this past month, I wrote an article about the Star Spangled Banner and listening to music in parades when I grew up as a kid in Vermont, and just the feelings that the music would elicit even today. And it was basically about patriotism. Is it nature or nurture?
Right.
And so
Exactly
it was
so.
fun, and so I'll put my headset on, and I'll put some classical music with just the music, no singing, and I'll sit there and for hours just let it pour out. And that's the thing I love about writing, is that I can just let it out, but I need to concentrate. I'll think about it, have a little bit of pressure of a deadline, and I'll sit down and I'll just say, okay, I'm going to write it out in like 3 or 4 hours, and I get the article out. And it's so much fun, and I have a very supportive publisher for Positive Tribe. We're just in tune, and that's a great way for people to get positivity out to the world, because I just found in my company too, many people, their fallback position online is to be really angry, to write nasty emails, because there's this anonymity to the internet. It's like driving down the street and someone flipping you the bird. It's like you're
Right.
not going to catch them. And I just felt like, why aren't people being civil? Where is negotiation? Where is talking? Where's diversity but kindness? And I tease my dad, because as he's getting older, the filters are less. And he's getting
That's
a
kinda
little
good,
more
though,
verbal.
Because he'll speak his mind,
He does, but sometimes I'm like, Dad, you got to be really careful how
okay.
you say that. Well, I've written some really fun articles about stuff my father said,
Oh, my
or the way he
goodness.
says it. And I've done some really great interviews with my parents, which is great because that's family history.
Yes,
We talk a lot about
can
making
create their memoirs.
Exactly. And for me, I did it on video in addition to the written word, because now I've got it both. And I found that most young folks, actually all of us, have an attention span of a gnat.
Yeah.
And they want to see things quick.
Oh,
So
yeah.
my kids and my nephews and nieces like to see the pictures of their grandparents, the videos of their grandparents,
Sure.
not just the word.
Right.
On a side note, going back to writing, my father wrote a book years ago. I said, Dad, I want your family history. So he wrote a book called My 50 Golden Years. And it's still out there. He talked about raising his golden retrievers over 50 years.
Oh, my
It
goodness.
was an amazing book. And if you read it, I laugh every time. My dad's the funniest guy, and I can hear his voice in the book.
Oh, of
And that's the
course.
neat thing about writing, especially your story, is if somebody knows you, they can
Sure.
hear your voice
Yeah.
in the stories. and it's fun. Dad's written 5 books.
What? Oh my God,
5.
Lynn! If we still had the show continuing, I would invite her dad on
It's Dr.
to come
Jack.
on.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, he's an amazing guy, and he's been very supportive of what I do.
Oh, that's good.
So I know you and I have a lot to talk about, and it's going to run out of time. But
Yes.
the last book that I wrote goes back to the reason I got into online dating, and
Yes.
that's because Lou died.
Right.
And the next day I had to run his company.
Oh,
And the
goodness.
company is called Benfo Complete, and it's
Benfo
BENFO.
Complete.
COMPLETE.
Okay.
Complete. Benfotiamine is a vitamin supplement for neuropathy.
Mm-hmm.
My husband was diabetic, had neuropathy, and he didn't want to be on drugs.
Right.
So he researched benfotiamine, which is a fat-soluble form of vitamin B1. The Germans have used it for 40 years to treat alcoholic neuritis.
Okay.
Benfotiamine is really good for neuropathy, which is damage to your nerve endings. Lou, he did it because he had it.
Right.
I didn't have diabetes. I didn't
Right.
have neuropathy, but I had to keep the company running to pay the bills.
Sure.
And I felt like an imposter for years because here I was with this company as the owner,
Of course.
and I didn't know what it was like to take it
Right.
until recently. And then I was like, you know what? I was the wife of a diabetic. I was the daughter-in-law of a diabetic for many, many, many years. So now why don't I emphasize the family part of diabetes?
Right.
Because
the aspect that you
my
know.
husband didn't want anybody to tell him what to do. I didn't want to nag. He knew how to eat, but he loved my cookies. And I wrote an
Right.
article, Did My Cookies Kill My Husband? Which always brings a laugh,
goodness.
but it was really true because he would rather eat the cookie than worry about his sugar.
Yeah.
So in this little book, it's called Your Itty Bitty, Your Amazing Itty Bitty. This was the first time I'd written about the company because last year, in the last 6 months, benfotiamine is being researched by researchers for Alzheimer's, which they're considering type 3 diabetes.
That's right. That's what Dr. Perlmutter calls it. He coined that type
Exactly.
3 diabetes.
Benfotiamine
Yes.
is right now showing positivity towards slowing down the progression of Alzheimer's disease. And I'm thinking, if I don't talk about it, then no one's going to talk about it.
Good for you.
And that's when I said, you know what? In addition to the Alzheimer's, it's the neuropathy, it's the sciatica, it's the retinopathy, it's all those things that this vitamin could possibly help you with. So why not talk about it? And I realized that, cancer doctors don't have cancer and they can talk about things.
Right.
And someone told me, Deb, you don't have neuropathy, you don't have diabetes, but you've been working with this stuff for 20 years.
How do they reach you if people are interested in purchasing supplements or whatever?
They can go to our website, which is benfocomplete.com. 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 My father, Dr. Jack, our 94-year-old, works for me.
Oh, nice.
And so we can call Dr. Jack, 888-493-8014. Talk to Dr. Jack. But on the website, we have a very comprehensive website, which talks about benfotiamine, talks about our story, talks about what it's good for. And I encourage everybody to, if you know somebody with diabetes, because everybody's got someone in their life that is being
Sure.
affected by diabetes or neuropathy from chemotherapy is a big problem now. And then I actually hosted a town hall last night and had a customer from Houston who has neuropathy from unknown causes, but he's affiliated with a group of young 20, 30-somethings who are getting neuropathy from COVID.
Oh, wow.
So I encourage everybody, if you've got an inkling that you might have neuropathy, which is the damage to your nerve endings, it's tingling, burning, or numbness,
Right.
check it out
Yeah.
because it's a vitamin supplement. And I take it. It's great for nails, hair, and everything else, and a lot of, energy bees. So
Wow. And so, Debbie, how else can we reach you? I know you gave that Benfo Complete website, but if people want to reach you and read your book, do you have a way they could purchase your book?
yes, all the books are actually on Amazon.
Okay.
Or they're, The Woman Behind the Smile is on my website, thewomanbehindthesmile.com. If someone has been a victim to a romance scam, they can reach out to SCARS at any scam now, romancescamsnow.com, or go to thewomanbehindthesmile.com. I have a lot of the shows. I did a podcast for 3 years. I have all the replays of the podcast. I interviewed a lot of the victims, a lot of survivors of other things, and the Woman Behind the Smile was really quite comprehensive, and it was a great way for me to move from writing to
Right. To be able
video
to
and
fit
being
in.
online, just like you guys have done.
Well,
So,
thank you so much for sharing your story,
My pleasure.
and thank you so much for creating something beautiful out of that. So,
well, thanks for reaching out. And Lynn, I appreciate you contacting me because I can't get the word out by myself. It really takes a village to get this word out to protect our mothers and our
Yes.
grandmothers and our daughters.
yes,
So.
absolutely.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Well, thank you everybody for tuning in to another episode. And who do we have next week, Lynn?
So our guest next week is Dr. Miriam Zilberglate, I believe it is. And she is a MD who is moving into the more holistic space and opening a concierge medicine practice based in Miami. So,
Yep.
fortunately, there are some doctors that understand that it's not just about the body; it's about all of the whole person.
Right. Absolutely. Well, thank you everybody for tuning in, and have a great week. Thank you, Lynn.
Imagine rediscovering a past life.
Now imagine finding the person you shared it with.
And I just told all my friends, I'm like, you guys have to read this because I can't put it down. And I have not even gotten to the half of the book yet.
We are Lynn Everard and Louise Gomez, and we are the authors of the book, The Reuniting of Two Past Lives and the Unveiling of the 12 Sacred Lessons.
We invite you to purchase the book and discover the magic. Even if you have never written a book, you are still an author. In fact, we all are. In every moment, each of us is writing our own unique story that we call our lives. Because many of us are, as in the lyrics of the Dan Hill song, Sometimes When We Touch, writers still trapped within our truth. If this is you, why not start writing your thoughts in a journal? It will help you get your truth on paper and could just be the start of your own book. And don't forget to join us here every week for the next edition of The Editor's Desk.